Yield starts with crop nutrition. That plant somehow senses its fertility status right from the very beginning. All right, think about the 4 R's. The right place, the right rate, the right source, the right time. It's actually genius. And all of those things interact to make sure that that plant has the proper fertility right from the very beginning.
What we haven't really addressed in recent years is the soil biology, and that's where we're learning and isolating a lot more understanding. What's going on in our soils with the bacteria, the crop interactions? Are there partners there that we can work with to help improve crop nutrient use efficiency? And that's where the biologicals start to come in. The question I get often is, Connor, which one should I be using? Which biological do I need to put on the farm? So you're asking me the wrong question. What are you looking to improve on your farm? Why do you want to use a biological? Now let's go find the right biological to fit that need.
Years ago, when I think about my granddad, and you started talking about biology, it was just fertilizer and, controlling weeds. And then we got into where we were like, let's start going into no-till. And then now we're trying to feed the biology because now we got to live in soil. And we think about how can we best do that? Get the biology products there near the seed. So it's going to help release nutrients and then your crop's going to respond better. That is a new thought. You think generational changes. This is something on the cutting edge now.
Fred, take it away.
Hey, thank you very much, David. I appreciate you sticking around to the bitter end. I hope you're in good shape. That was a great time last night, I got to say. I really enjoyed that. So I couldn't be happier to be back. Dr. Sible and I are going to lead off this. You can't get university guys here without looking at a few hundred PowerPoint slides. And so that's what we did. I know some of you heard me before, but I want to share with you, I get way more credit than I deserve. All right, I got a big mouth, but I actually have no research skill. But happily, here we go. Wait for it.
Talk to it nine. Just give me another.
I pushed the wrong button. There we go. So I have a very excellent research team that does this research, and largely run by Dr. Sible here. So here's our research team, right? And we are a team. So I get way more credit than I deserve, but this is the guy that actually does a lot of the work. Okay, so I don't think of myself as his boss. He's my partner. All right. He's younger than me, so he's the young doctor. I'm the old doctor. And I'm at the age where I can't really do anything interesting because I'm likely to hurt myself or I'm in danger to others. So Dr. Sible does most of the work. All right, well, this is my team right here. And you notice that's me right there. I know I'm hard to spot among all these attractive females. See my strategy here in the picture? I try and surround myself with attractive females. I think it makes me look better. Pretty sure it's working. There's Dr. Sible over there. So this is the team we do our research with. We do our research with graduate students. And I want to try and set the stage here of the things we work on. But I'm going to ask you a few questions. We had this panel about the Farm Bill. I'm sorry I missed that, but I have a very important question for you. And the question is, how do you know if a politician likes corn? Again, I'm worried about this with the upcoming Farm Bill. And I have photographic evidence. I don't know say what you will about former President Trump, but I tell you, he was a corn lover. He's pretty good at corn. I mean, how could he not have been? Now, I am not a politician, but I like corn pretty well, too. Now, I am, if you look at President Trump, he's sort of a pollination guy. I'm a brown silk guy. I mean, I'm honestly not sure about President Biden. I'm certain he has some redeeming features or qualities, but I'm pretty sure Corn lovin's not one of them, at least based on the photographic evidence. And in all honesty, I'm actually not sure about Mr. Hula or Dr. Sible here, if they're corn lovers or not, but we'll get to see. So I want to set the stage, and I want to talk about yield and productivity. And I'm going to ask you another question, and the question is, what are the 3 P's of productivity? Anybody see this stupid commercial? Price, and they're not price, by the way. I know price is super important to you guys. Spent all morning talking about it. I know that's why you're here. All right, the 3 P's of productivity. These are the things that you work on all the time. They are products. I mean, that's what we got here. The Mac Hopper product. They are practices. All right, so what practice are you going to do where you need the product? What's the 3rd P? Physiology. I just got to start with P. It doesn't sound like it, but it does. That's what we do. Okay, so physiology is trying to figure out this why certain products and practices work to increase your yield. I mean, think about it. That's what you want to do. Now, I feel compelled to give you a lesson, right? An important lesson. I'm going to try and teach you an impactful, important lesson. And if I can make this lesson a little entertaining, that won't mind. But I'm going to show you a rule of how physiology influences how a practice or a product works. All right, it's called the Goldilocks rule. The yield response to a product or a practice always follows the Goldilocks rule. You remember Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, right? It's a children's fairy tale. It has something to do with porridge. I'm not sure what porridge is. Well, I think it's oatmeal. But, and it had to do with the temperature of the porridge, right? Well, that's the Goldilocks rule. Too much, too little, just right. Now, every single product or practice follows the Goldilocks rule. So some of them are more, do it a little harder than others. So, too much, too little, just right. Now, when it comes to money and we have too little, well, we like more, right? If it's stress, if you're too stressed, well, you like to be less stressed. And, there's products and everything that does that. So, everything follows the Goldilocks rule. Too much, too little, just right. And obviously, we like to be just right. Now, let me talk about stress. There are products that release stress. We got our hands on one of these, and we thought, oh, if a little's good, more is better. I mean, obviously, it should follow the label. But I'm going to show you an example where we really learned the Goldilocks rule, where, we were stressed, and we put too much of a stress relief product on, and we ended up with this. And suffice to say, it had a fairly negative impact on yield. Anybody ever see this? So this is an ear abnormality from an improper product application. Too much at the wrong time. My point is, everything follows the Goldilocks rule. And that's what we're after. We're trying to get everything just right. So the other question is, how common is 300 bushel per acre corn? How many of you see 300 bushel per acre corn? I know, Mr. Hula, this is a crop failure for you. but for a lot of us, this is the question. 300 bushel corn. I'm going to tell you, in our research since 2015, routine. We see it routinely. Didn't see it until 2015. I spent my whole career trying. But finally started to pick up in 2015, and we're going to share with you some of the practices that allowed us to produce 300 bushel corn. And that is the 7 wonders of 300 bushel corn. So this is our top 7 list of those factors that each year can have a positive, but the bad news is sometimes they go negative. Impact on crop yield. We've done enough research with corn. We're going to put these in order. We give an average bushel per acre value. Now remember that average bushel per acre value is an average of a range. And we do our research in Illinois. It might be a little different, but I'm still pretty sure these same factors are going to be involved. Now there are some prerequisites. There's some table stakes. There's some things that are really important, but they don't add yield. The cow guy is my best friend until he sends me the bill And I continually have to remind myself, not to compact the soil. I mean, these are things that either are done once or they take yield away. So control of weeds and pests, and I put this in, I underlined it. There's no damn way you're going to go 300 bushels without foliar protection. Hate to tell you. I mean, and you're probably going to have more than one foliar protection spray, but at least one. That might not be a prerequisite for 200, but gosh, for 300 it is. And then you know how a lot of you base your soil fertility is based on the soil test. And do you think the soil test is calibrated to 300 bushels? I doubt it. I mean, don't even get me started there. I can go on and on. So I say you need a base level. And then you're going to have to do something on top of that base level. So I don't have time to develop this whole 7 wonder concept. So I'm going to show it to you all at once. And I'm going to promise you, we could speak ad nauseum about each one of these, for hours. But here's the top 7 factors that each year have a positive impact on corn yield. So, of course, weather rules, Mother Nature. Usually she's not working for me. And then I refer to the weather using that pregnant dog term. I say this weather's a real pregnant dog. And she's been a real pregnant dog most of the year for us. Number 2. All right, well, here's the nuance of these wonders. This is a cool thing I'm going to try and get in your head, right? These things interact with each other. So this is what's going to vex you every year. And I'm going to show you this by asking you a question. So all these things interact with each other. And my question is, do you think weather influences the availability of nutrients? Damn right it does. Oh, every single thing about fertility is influenced by the weather. I'll show you one example. This is not one I've seen much of this year, but I have seen it. Ever seen this? This is weather-induced nitrogen loss. Now, fertility is the biggest factor under your control that impacts yield. Fertility. Yield starts with fertility. I think Mr. Hula and I are going to agree on this. We might disagree on how we're going to achieve it, but it starts with fertility. Right? We must do a better job of fertilizing. Right? Influenced by the weather. We've got some of it's lost. We've got environmental aspects to it. This stuff's expensive. So that is what we have to do a better job of. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Now, I want you to see that here's all these other factors. They're all super important. And these things interact with each other. I told you that weather influences fertility. Do you think some hybrids respond differently to weather or differently to fertility? Do you think some hybrids tolerate population better than others? Or tillage better than others? Those are interactions. Right? This is what makes your life so hard, but also so interesting. Trying to manage these interactions. I mean, think if you had 7 kids. How many fights and alliances they could get into. Think of how fantastic it'd be if they all work together. Right? That's a positive interaction. So these things can interact positively. I know Dr. Sible's going to talk a little bit about biologicals, but if we developed a biological that controlled the weather, we would rule agriculture, right? Better hope that doesn't end up in our hands. I mean, even if we could partially control the weather, that's what you're after here. Now, if you can think of a factor other than these that has a big impact on corn yield, we would surely like to know it. We are trying to measure these interactions. So, individually, if you optimize each one of these, it's 300 bushels. All right, now, I'm going to get more than that. You're going to have to optimize each one of these individually, and then you have to optimize their positive interactions. Again, if I could just get a biological to make fertility a little more available, positive interaction. Possibility for higher yield. That's the key. Optimize each of the 7 wonders and their positive interactions. And by the way, you have to have the prerequisites right. I mean, you don't control weeds, you're not going to grow dandelions. I mean, it just has to be done. Now, I want to talk about one more thing before I turn it over to Dr. Sible, and I want to mention a little bit about fertility, right? Because I said that is what we have to improve. And it takes a lot of fertility to grow 300 bushels. All right, I calculated here, how am I gonna make sure that I have that amount of fertility? I mean, think about this. This is what takes you a 300 bushel farm. So I'm showing you my favorite elements, 6 favorite. That's what's required to produce the crop. All right, so that's how much it has to take up to fertilizer of the soil. And then I show you over here what you remove with the grain. So, when you harvest your corn, when you harvest 300 bushels, this is how much of these nutrients you take off your field and send someplace else. And we're going to ultimately have to fertilize to replace that. I mean, you're physically taking that amount off and sending it somewhere else. Where does it go? Okay, I looked it up. It goes to Mexico, to China, and Japan. By the way, Google knows. Google is everything. Kind of creepy. That's going somewhere else, right? You've got to replace that. How are you going to make sure that those amounts of elements are available? How? It all comes down to the 4 R's that are source, rate, time, and place. And this stuff's genius if you think about it. I mean, I don't have time to talk about all these, but I'm going to tell you that placement has to change. I'm guessing that a lot of you are broadcasting the fertilizer over the surface, right? Because it's easy and it's fast. But that has to change. We have to do a better job of placement. Why do we have to do a better job of placement? It has to do with the size of each plant's root system. All right, I'm going to pull the pants down off of the plant, show you its root system. And the root system of the corn plant is way smaller than you think. I'm showing you here, this is at the end of the season, this is the size of the root system. I mean, look at the size of that. I know you've seen pictures of roots, right? They're 2 foot wide, 5 foot deep, and that's called a tree. That's not a corn plant. Just dig them up. So the root system of the corn plant only spreads 6 to 8 inches horizontally. See this thing right here? This is an expensive scientific instrument that we call a rulerometer, and we can actually quantify the spread of that root system. Roots do not cross the road. They sit at about 6 to 8 inches. So why on earth would you fertilize the whole soil and root system 6 to 8 inches up? That has to change. The future has to be better placement of fertilizers. There's a lot of ways to do it. This is the good news. So there's a lot of different ways you can better place fertilizer. You can put it on the planter. I mean, you can do it. You can buy the starter setup or on the planter setup. You can put it on both sides. Put it on both sides and the furrow. I don't care. Get the one on the planter. And this makes a big impact. I mean, here's our starter setup. We can put on a couple products on the go. We can mix biologicals and products, and we very often see an advantage of 10-30-40, and we can put something else in this 10-30-40. All right, that's placement. We also can place, and that's placing some of the fertilizer. We also can ban that fertilizer directly under the future row. This is like starter on steroids. And if you're a strip tiller, this is what we would recommend. All right, this was our former toolbar. This is a poker-based toolbar. It's not, it's on till ground. Well, now we have a strip till row. We're going to look at strip till ground. We're putting the fertilizer 4 to 6 inches deep, right under the future row, and then we see it to the row. Here's an example, one of many examples I can show you. Same hybrid, same population, same planting date, same amount of fertilizer. We broadcast it there, we banded it there. Which one do you think is better? I'm going with the banded one, right? That's placement. Placing that fertilizer where the root is. Now that can be done at planting, but you can also do some in-season applications. I know you all are familiar with Y drops. I mean, here's our Y. We have a research Y drop rig. And I know you know what happens with a Y drop. I'm putting the fertilizer right there along the row. That's where I'm pretty sure the root is. I mean, now, think about how fertilizer moves, nitrogen fertilizer. Nitrogen fertilizer doesn't move sideways, it moves down. Well, sometimes it moves up into the atmosphere, which is also vertical, I guess. So when we cultivate down the middle versus the side dress, we typically pick 600 bushels better when we need the side dress. Has to do with placement. That's your season placement. Now, there are other ways you can do placement. We invented this one at the University of Illinois. We're working on this is what we call dry drop. See how we put the fertilizer right down the row? The dry fertilizer? And we're researching this was very promising. It takes advantage of the fact that the crop funnels water down the row. I'm going to tell you, and I think we're going to talk a lot about this in the panel, we got to fertilize better. I mean, we have to. Yeah, the season-long fertilizer, there's a whole bunch of opportunities. So I'm going to say, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sible here, because I covered some of these, but he's going to look more at some of the ones down here. And I tell you, if you have them all right, you should be able to get 300 bushels. So, Dr. Sible, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Well, I talk about a tough act to follow, right? Thanks, Dr. Bilo. So, Dr. Sible, as in my intro mentioned, done some stuff in biologicals, biostimulants, but it's all about management. You see biologicals right there at the bottom of the list. And I loved that title. I'm going to steal this. I don't know if you've trademarked that phrase yet. Biology is fertility.
Trademark.
All right, I'll send you the royalties then. That's awesome, right? I love that phrase. Biology is fertility, right? Because, oh, there it is, biologicals. And I think Dr. Bilo just expressed the importance of fertility. So I think we can connect those dots. But sometimes we think biology of the living, right? The microbes. But don't forget about the biology that is your crop. A plant is biology, right? And when Dr. Bilo is pushing 300 bushels, that's a lot of biology growing there, a lot of biomass growing there. Now, as he said, I'm the new doctor, and as the new doctor, for better or worse, I got a long career ahead of me yet, a long ways till I retire. And I got to start thinking, what's down the road? What am I going to be interested in moving forward that I also think you should be interested in moving forward? And that is, in our opinion, residue and residue management. And so that's what we're going to take a little bit of time to kind of focus on before we get into this panel, because we want you thinking what's coming, what's down the road, what is next. And so we've got, the 7 wonders of 300 bushel corn. So I'm going to change the question, and 7 wonders impact on residue, right? Logical question. So we have to think then, though, where does residue come from? There's a few obvious things that we can think about, right? So obviously cover crops, right? There's our cereal rye. I did get Dr. Bilo to put cover crops in this year, so I call that a win for his postdoc. But that's obvious, right? So cover crop, more biomass, more residue to deal with. And you can see here that's also a no-till system. So tillage, certainly, as you go to no-till, strip-till, more residue, right? Double crop, right? So I know as we get further north, maybe not as relevant. I've got a lot of people from down south, double crop, right? More residue. And one thing I don't want you to forget, right? Some people say, right, I don't do cover crops, I don't do double crops. Is residue really an issue for me? Have your on-farm yields gone up? More residue, right? And that's something we kind of want to focus on and talk about. Higher yields is higher residue, and that can impact next year's crop. And so when we think about that, we're going to use corn. Corn is king, right? As a good example, because not only is corn king from a bushels and a grain marketing perspective, it produces a lot of residue. I'm going to show that here graphically, right? So you got a yield here on the y-axis, and you got residue accumulation on the x-axis. And sure enough, as yield goes up, residue goes up, right? About 250 bushel crop, 5 tons of residue. That's a lot of residue. Now, if I go to you and say 5 tons, how quickly can you visualize that in your mind, right? It's not that easy. I can't do it. I can't even think of what 1 ton of residue might look like. But let's take this down to the bushel level. For every bushel you produce, how much residue do you produce? And on a dry matter basis, 43.7 pounds of stover going out the back end of the combine. Now 43.7 doesn't seem like much. So if your on-farm yield average has gone up 10 bushels in the last couple of years, you also have 440 more pounds of residue to manage. So be thinking about high yields, right? Residue is not just the cover crop, the double crop, the minimal tillage. It's yield as well. And so when we go back to the 7 wonders, 300 bushel corn, and I start to think, where's the 300 bushel residue? And we do that quick math, right? So I take Dr. Bilo's values and I just multiply by the value of the residue, 43.7 pounds residue. And weather is worth 2 or more tons of residue per acre. Fertility is also worth 2 or more tons of residue per acre, and then it goes down the list, right? You add it all up, that 300 bushel crop, 6.6 tons of residue out the back. That's a lot to manage. And so let's put some more direct numbers, right? So we got different farms, different management systems, programs, right? Different yield levels. So, you know, if you got 180 bushels, you're looking at almost 4 tons. 250, there's 5.5 tons. Dr. Beal is pretty good. He's got 300 bushels and 6.6 tons, but fortunately he's not Hula good. At 616, right, 13.5 tons. You got a lot of residue to manage, sir. That's definitely something that I'd love to see and get my hands on from residue. Because we have a question then follow up, right? That's a lot of residue. What do you do with it? And I talk to farmers about residue and they say, yeah, that's trash. I say, no, it's not trash, right? I think it can be treasure. But it is a logical question. Is residue trash or is it treasure? And here's why we call it trash, right? That's not a fun day. You keep doing that, pick up the planters, clean it out, right? That's the trash. And I agree with you. I've done this myself on our farm planter and all that. Not a good day when we're stopping all the time to deal with that. So I get it. But we have to start thinking about some other things, right? What else do we have going on in here? And it goes back to Dr. Beal's 300 bushels and the value of fertility. Fertility is nutrients. And what is the nutritional value of corn residue, right? Start with nitrogen, right? We know that's important for corn production. It's also a big input expense on the farm. You get about 20 pounds of N per ton of residue. And if you're at a 230 bushel crop, it's 108 pounds of N per acre. That's quite a bit, right? It's about half the crop's going to need right there in last year's residue. Especially if you're thinking corn on corn scenario, right? Phosphorus. You know, a lot of phosphorus goes out with the grain. As Dr. Vila said, he sent it to China, Japan, Mexico, but there's still some left on your farm. About 21 pounds of B205 still out there. Don't forget that value. And I think this one we all talk about a lot when we're familiar with potassium. A lot of potassium in the residue, right? So 230 bushel crop, it's 122 pounds of K2O. That is why residue should be considered treasure. It's a valuable asset related to fertility, which is number 2 on that 7 wonders list, that we need to be thinking about. And by the way, if I've got 616 bushels and 13.5 tons, those numbers just go up. So at 13.5 tons, you got 270 pounds of N, 54 pounds of P2O5, 311 K2O. Now I want to come get my hands on some of this residue down there because it's almost equivalent to our fertility bill here in Central Illinois. Cover that right up. But there's a lot of value in the residue. Well, what's the problem, right? It doesn't release it fast enough. So we have to find out how do we unlock the value of the residue, right? Treasure is usually in a chest. You got to unlock the chest to get to the treasure, right? That's the key that we're looking for, and that's what it's going to take. So I'm going to take everyone back to junior high or high school, and I assume many of you went through the same experience as I did, getting dragged to the auditorium for some big school-wide speaker coming in, right? What are we going to talk about this time? Pulling us out of class, right? And we've got this symbol and phrase I think we all have heard about before, right? Reduce, reuse, recycle. And what are we taught when we learn about this back in high school, junior high days, right? Reduce means we got to minimize waste. Got too much garbage, make less of it. Reuse, use it twice or more. Water bottles, number 1 example, right? Why can't we use reusable water bottles? For sure. And then recycle, find a new use for it, right? Thinking about that. So I like this phrase. It's simple. It's catchy. Reduce, reuse, recycle. So I'm going to rebadge it in the U of I fashion. Of course, that means line of colors. But we're going to reduce. What does that mean? It's residue degradation. Now, I want to be very clear. Residue is what's after the combine goes through. So you still got to produce high yields. You still got to produce a lot of stover. So I don't want you to reduce how much you produce. But after it's produced, it goes out the combine. Now we got to reduce it, right? So that's the key concept there. I love residue. Produce all of it you can. There's a lot of value there. Residue degradation. We're going to reuse it. That's the nutrient value. That's the fertility aspect of residue, right? When the weather makes your fertilizer unavailable, maybe it makes your residue nutrition available. And then, of course, recycle, and that's more yield for next year's crop. No doubt about it. So that is the crop physiology rebrand of reduce, reuse, recycle as it relates to your residue. As I like to say, residue is on the rise. It's the future and something we want to be considering. Now, when we think about residue, I used corn as stover as an example. There's a lot of different types of residue, right? Your cover crops, your double crops. And when you start thinking about management plans for residue, you have to also think about the biology you're working with and the good old C/N ratio, right? And so what this is source dependent, but C/N ratio is for however many carbons I have, what's the equivalent amount of nitrogens, right? So 10 to 1 is easy math. For every 10 carbon, I got 1 nitrogen. That's very important. And the microbes, the biology in our soils, they have a ratio that they really like, that's palatable. It's the food source they prefer, and that's at about a 24 to 1 ratio. And that's because microbes themselves, just from a structure, have a C/N ratio of 8 to 1. But the microbes, when they release that nutrition, by the way, that takes a lot of energy, very, very expensive energy. So it takes 16 carbons for energy, and 8 of them just to maintain the biomass. And that's why they like 24 to 1. And so when we think about that, a C/N ratio greater than 24 to 1 induces N immobilization. That is, they're stealing nitrogen from the soil to go after that high carbon nitrogen ratio. And if it's less than that, that induces mineralization. They got the carbon and there's some extra N left over, and they're going to give that back to the next crop. So when you're thinking about those sources, right, here's some examples, some textbook values. These change every once in a while depending on where you're coming from. Pretty ballpark, right? So you got rye or wheat straw, a lot of carbon, a little bit of nitrogen. Corn stover, and we just talked about we produce a lot of that, upwards of 5 tons per every year in a cornfield. That's 57 to 1. And then as you get into your leguminous and new clovers, hairy vetch, right now we're getting below, and then there's microorganisms themselves. So when we're following these crops up here, that's going to induce N immobilization. And when we're down at the bottom, that's going to induce N mineralization. So if you're in the cover crop world, they say put a grass with a legume type crop. But the key thing that's important, you have to grow these crops. I'm not saying C/N ratio that high is bad, because now you're saying I shouldn't be growing wheat or corn, right? No, it just means this is what we have to manage it. And if we immobilize it, when is this happening naturally? A little bit in the fall, probably a lot of that in the spring, and that's why we see that penalty, that nitrogen deficiency. But if we can get it to immobilize in the fall, guess what it does in the spring? It mineralizes back, right? That's where management of residue comes in. It's understanding what we're starting with and trying to get it closer to here before the next crop is out there. That's the key. And so what we've been researching, what we're excited about moving forward, and what we think is going to be a big part of management systems in the future is residue management, and it's going to take multiple approaches. And so just to get your brains thinking the concept behind it, I do have a case study of long-term continuous corn that we've been working on. And so when we have our long-term continuous corn, right, so we have a trial design and some site characteristics here. Long-term continuous corn site, this was established in 2003. Now I've been working with Dr. Bilo for 7 years, but I was not working for Dr. Bilo back in 2003. So I step on that site, it's kind of like a little history lesson, right? It's like going back in time when they started that. Now I get to carry that torch and move on to the next one. But it does get you scratching your head a little bit, like, where was I in 2003 when Dr. Bilo started this field? And I was at the local apple orchard, apparently. They're high in 2003. Now, I did not grow up on a farm, small town, did not grow up on a farm, nothing to do with row crops till school, but apparently I always knew where I was going to end up someday on this stage talking about corn. So there was me in 2003 when this site was started, right? So we got that site, and then we did some studies last 2 years, so it's either 17th or 19th year continuous corn. Long term, that's the key point there. And so what did we do on this site? Well, we looked at multiple approaches, right? First things first, go out with combine, size the residue, expose the surface area so the microbes can just get to that residue easier. A couple things I like about this. It's not an extra pass, right? It's going out with the combine, so no extra diesel from that regard. And it's one-time purchase, right? Once you got that sizing implement, however you're doing that on farm, it's one-time purchase. So it's a good start. And we've seen some really positive success with that. But I go back to that C/N ratio. I said that's the whole problem with residue degradation. It's the C/N ratio is not palatable to the microbes. So is there something I can do to make the residue more palatable to the microbes, right? They got a high C/N ratio, so what if I just tend to lower that C/N ratio in the fall? We're doing ammonium sulfate, a little sulfur, a little nitrogen on top of fresh residue. It's like tricking the microbes to lowering the C/N ratio, and they go after it a little faster. We've been doing this for 4 years now. It works really well. And you're thinking, fall applied broadcast ammonium sulfate, is that a recommended practice? Especially in a no-till scenario, right? Sitting on the surface. I'm hoping it's immobilized in the fall, you get that residue to degrade, and then it remineralizes in the spring. So there's a strategy here. It's just enough to get the microbes going and mobilize that end so they don't mobilize what you put out next spring. And then, of course, what about the microbes? And so on top of that, we said, let's do with in a no-till, like a fall burn down, throw out a bacterial blend with that. Accelerate the natives a little bit faster, put the microbes right on the fresh residue as you go. So what we've seen, so if you're in research, small plot equipment, and you're on the same site for almost 20 years, you compare long-term continuous corn unmanaged. This is 20 years treating that corn like it's corn and soybean. Do not recommend that. That penalty is 48 bushels, about 25% yield loss. Now, I don't expect it to get much worse than that. There's some in the room, I understand that if you've been working on this, you found a way to reverse that. But if you don't touch, if you just treat that continuous corn like you do corn and soy, there's a penalty of 48 bushels. Not a good day when you can compare that to the next field over that was rotated. So when we sized the residues, right, we got 13 bushels back. That was pretty exciting, right? Like I said, it's a one-time purchase, so I can do that every year on the continuous corn for sure. We added ammonium sulfate, right? Now it gave us one more bushel on top of. This is additive. I can tell you the ammonium sulfate without chopping was worth 9 bushels. But you put them together and there's another bushel or 14 total compared to the penalty. This is where things got really exciting. What we did next is what happened when we added, with the sizing, with the nitrogen and sulfur, a microbial blend. We got another 11 bushels out of it, or a total difference of 25 bushels from the penalty. And bushels and numbers are cool, but I like percentages. We reduced the continuous corn yield penalty by 52%. Now this is extreme worst case, right? Somebody studied residue, I want the worst case scenario. So that 48 penalty and stuff, I understand in the real world, not quite that big. But this just clearly shows, not only can you manage residue, but it's a synergistic effect. And I don't have all the numbers up here, but I can tell you that any combination, we did 3 things, right? Mechanical, fertility, and biological. Any combination of 2 or 3 of those was better than any one alone. Now, anyone alone, if you want to start small, did work. You put them together, that's the key. It's optimizing the biology as a systems approach, what we're really excited to. And so I want to go back to that fertility component, because not only is fertility important for 300 bushel corn, it's important for 300 bushel, 6.6 ton residue decomposition. And then next year's grain yields. And it kind of boils down to this. Microbes need nutrients too. So whether it's biologically you're applying or biology in your soils, right, we're not necessarily looking to replace fertilizer because they need nutrients to cycle nutrients. It's a systems for high yield, and it all comes back together full circle. And so the research conclusion as we look down the road and what we're excited about, right, is that the 7 wonders of 300 bushel corn can also be the foundation for 6.6 tons of treasure if you can manage it. And we're pretty happy about what we're doing. We think biologicals is a part of that and some other aspects. And that's what what we have as we transition the panel. Just want to get your minds thinking about what the future could be. Thank you.
And our final panelist is David Hula. And you heard Dr. Bilo refer to, hey, 300 bushel might be a crop failure for you. For those of you who don't know, the reason is he is the corn record holder. 615 bushels per acre is the record. And Dave is going to share some opening comments, and then we'll invite them to the stage as a panel. David, take it away.
Thank you, Dave. If y'all been around me long enough, I was over there, my legs shaking, I just don't feel comfortable. I'd much rather be behind a John Deere steering wheel as opposed to standing in front of y'all. So typically I like to, say a blessing before just to help me calm down. But I want to bring a couple of things. I've been going around the country, we're part of Total Acre, and the farmers got a lot better attitude right now because they had a little bit of rain. But we got a lot to be thankful for, don't we? Let's think about it. There's some folks in this room here that had some struggles. And, you think about the benefits. We get worried about, I sure wish I had some rain. But, we got some people here that just had lost a loved one. We got some that are sick. And, we're going through some stuff right now at the house. So, if we could just bow our heads so we could calm down, and just help me calm down. Dear Lord, we're just thankful for this day. We're thankful for everybody here. And we just would like for you to lay your healing hand on those that are just going through some struggles, whether they're unrequested prayers, dear Lord, or just those that just need your grace. Be with those that have been less fortunate than we are. We're just grateful for the rain that you've given us, dear Lord, and we're just humbled that we hope that we become lights for you, so that as we move through this, our daily lives, that others can see your presence in us. Just help me so I can help relay the message that you want for me to give these folks here in this kind audience, and thanks for Meristem putting this together, dear Lord. Bless each and every one of us, particularly as we travel home. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. So, watching Fred Below, and then, Mr. Connor, and there was going to be another person on the panel, and unfortunately he couldn't make it. Some situations happened. But Dr. Connor, Mr. Connor, or Dr. Connor, whatever, who in the world is he? So I'm Googling him, and I want his phone number, y'all. Yeah. So, because I'm excited. Now, I hear the Seven Wonders. Man, I do not feel comfortable up there, because I'm going to fall. So, the neat thing about what Dr. Below has done is he's introduced things, and we've had successes because some of the things that we have done, and now I can put a point as to why it's happened. So, is the sound working with me down here?
We're good.
Yeah, you're good. I was in Johnston, Iowa, just the other day. A Brazilian group came in, and I had a chance to talk to them. And it's hard to talk to a group where you have an interpreter. Have y'all ever done that? I say 2 sentences, and it takes them 2.5 minutes to say what I said. What in the world did they tell them? It wasn't that complicated. But so and when I did that, they, of course, they want to know, hey, what'd you do? And fertility, and it's a whole system, y'all. Dr. Fred Relay showed his, all the students there. David does not take much of the credit for the success we've had. There are 3 things that grow high yielding corn, or whatever crop it is. Number 1, the good Lord's got to bless you. Number 2, you got to have pioneer seeds. So I don't know what that is. And number 3, you got to have John Deere paint. Right? So without that, when y'all are asking for some additional things on the 7 Wonders, I'm trying to give you some help there, Dr.
Appreciate that.
So, there's no silver bullet. It takes a team. I'm just going to run through these because I would feel more comfortable sitting up here with these guys and us having some little debates because, last year when I came, I got in late the evening before and Fred Below was talking and I'm listening. And he just laid it up on the tee. I'm not a golfer. I do play golf on occasion. What is it, the best hole, the best ball? What do they call that?
Scramble.
I don't know, whatever they call it. But we were in Arizona one time playing golf, and I sucked. I don't mind telling you. But I had the best day I've ever had. I killed a duck on the golf green. And I'm picking that duck up, and the groundkeeper's coming, running. I'm like, he wants to take us. No, I want to get this thing mounted. We're excited. But, those type of things, just getting, work with folks like that. But there is no silver bullet, y'all. Let's be clear of that. It takes a system. And we've been able to manipulate the system. And, when, he laid it up for me, and then I talked the next morning. It was funny, we had very similar slides. And then I talked to Rob. I said, what would be really cool is if somebody was talking with Fred Below, because we have a lot of similarities in our thoughts, but there's some things that I would like to challenge him on. And I was really hoping that he would say, yeah, that'd be a great idea. Why don't we get Fred Below and Randy Dowd? Another hero. I didn't mean for me to come back and do this, so I don't want him to challenge me. But I'm just going to run through some slides. Who is native of Wisconsin here? I'm trying to find the closest one. Let me get over here. Because I have no clue where I'm at. See this dot? Push that dot point on that map where we are today. All right. I'm a little bit ways from home. You see that yellow arrow? That's where I'm from. So when I go across the country and we're working with growers in the total agency group, I don't farm in Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, South Dakota, but corn is corn, and it's all grown in a medium called soil. And then we just got to figure out how to manage it. And this time of year, you know, crop looks great. Then when you come out here in December and January and it looks like y'all just picked the corn, residue still nice color, and you know, so I understand what Mr. Connor's talking about. So now I'm just going to zoom in real quick. Zoom in a little bit closer. Y'all know what that big body of water is to the right? That's the Atlantic Ocean. But what's that next body of water between the peninsula? Chesapeake. Now, do you know what's up here? Do you know what flows downhill? So we deal with a lot of we're close enough to DC, there's a lot of regulation going on. Y'all need to focus on what's happening. Think about what's happening in Chesapeake Bay. Water quality is a big thing, and you know, y'all got the guys that deal with a lot of manure and stuff. Pay attention to what's happening in the bay, because it's coming in your part of the world eventually. Just going to zoom in a little bit closer at Ringwood. We're on the banks of James River. We farm the ground. He talks about 2003 continuous corn, 20 years. We farm ground that was been first cultivated in 1609. It's been continuously farmed every year since then. Think about the changes that happened. We've come a long way from digging a hole, putting a couple catfish down there and 3 or 4 kernels of maize on top of it. This particular picture was taken in 2011. We had a really tough drought, averaged 49 bushels on 20-some hundred acres of corn. So you see the corners there, but also the things you can see that we do a lot of trials. We got some advanced line trials with genetics. We also rent some fields off to some other researchers, and we do a lot of experimenting. It's a whole lot easier to lose a few dollars or learn something on small acres than it is on larger acres. But as y'all talk to your customers or growers and you're trying new products, a farmer will never give up something that he knows pays. And y'all remember that? He will never give up something that he knows pays. So have a trial with, whether it's hopper throttle, excavator, whatever products y'all are talking about, and then definitely make sure they have a trial without. And don't always depend on yield monitors. How many of y'all have a corn hybrid plot? Or put them in? How do y'all like to harvest them? Yield monitors? How should you harvest them? A weigh wagon. Don't let the farmer just use his yield monitor, because sometimes they're going to miss something. That is key for me. Had a chance to work with my late granddad, my late dad, and you know, having my son Barley. I'm not a social media guy, but I've been told he's on, what is it, TikTok and stuff like that. So he's not giving away the keys to the kingdom there, but he does like to have some fun. So just be careful if you watch that TikTok. Quickly, we have a farmer's hands to success. 5 digits on your finger. Open-minded, positive attitude. Then we'll go to the next one. I'm not going to spend much time, but it's kind of like their 7 wonders. We just have keys to our success. Index finger, things that you can control: fertility, pest management, soil. And then we have our mechanical finger. Miss Sandy doesn't like that one, so we'll take that one off. Relationship finger. You know, picking the right corn hybrid is like finding your spouse. It's emotionally driven if done right, can be rewarding if done wrong, can be very costly. I've been married for 37 years, and Miss Sandy says it can still cost me a fortune. So, and then your little finger on your hand, we call that a playing finger. So we're just, I'm going to kind of stop here, because I just got other pictures, and I really want to have some interaction with these two guys and get some interaction from y'all, because I think that's what, you know, wrapping this thing up, y'all got a lot of enthusiasm. I came in late last night, I heard a bunch of noise, but I was ready to go to bed. So I went, crashed, and then got up, refreshed, and this is a big audience. And I heard y'all fed, what, 700 people yesterday, or during this time? I don't see 700 now, but I guess they're in other rooms. So, it's exciting. So, I don't know how, Mr. Dave, I'm ready to turn it over, but I'm excited to be here, and I want to hear them challenge me, and I want y'all to challenge us, all 3 of us up here.
All right, come on up, guys. So again, we're hopeful that we all have a lot of questions from the audience, and I'm sure you do. And again, as David suggested, we might see a little banter back and forth here as well. All right? So who's got our first question? And again, just be loud. I'll repeat them. It's hard to get to the mics as tight as we are in here. Who's got our first question? Rob, go. Okay, go.
With the advance of fungicides and foliar feeding, are we seeing more, just from a drive-by down the road standpoint, it seems like there's more stover, and the stover's not breaking down as quickly. Does that seem to be the case, or?
Connor, you got the question? This is probably to you, right? Residue.
Yeah, it's related to residue.
Oh, sorry, it's Fred.
Yeah, we're going to tag team this, so I'll tell you what we've seen is if you have residue, if you have corn plants that you've sprayed fungicide on, and you've kept them healthy with fertility, that residue will actually degrade faster. Because, I mean, you want to eat, well, how you want to say it?
Yeah, so when I think about it, right, if I give you 2 apples, one's all bruised and rotten and the other's perfect, which one do you want to eat? Perfect one. Microbes think the same way, and so we've got some work where the fungicide-treated residue actually degrades a little faster, a little better. But a bigger, healthier plant does produce more residue, so it's give and take on that.
Well, I'd like to add to it as well. I want my combine to mature my corn. If I'd have thrown more slides up, you'd see that we're picking green corn, at least from the ear leaf on below. If you got sap in that corn stalk when you harvest it, that corn cob, that stalk's going to degrade a lot faster. When you go out and wait till it's browning down, now you're dependent on moisture, temperatures, then you got to energize the biology, and if it's got green sap in that stalk, she's going to disappear.
Great responses, guys. Okay, next question. Rob, you have one. Go.
I just wanted to tee one up for Mr. Hula. So on the corn record holder, 2 things, do you think the genetic potential is higher than you've gotten? And maybe the 2 or 3 things the last 5 years that have got you to where the 600.
Is there more? Did
Well,
you hear the question?
I heard good questions, and years ago, Dr. Beeler mentioned Google, trying to figure out what the theoretical yield potential of corn is. And at some point in time, they used to say 500 bushel. Randy Dowdy blew that out of the water. He's quick to say, I don't know if y'all know Dowdy, he's from Georgia, world record soybean grower. He's the first one to 500 bushels. He clearly lets me know that, and it's all good. So, and I don't respond too much to it. But the theoretical yield, there was a professor, Tolomar, up in Gulf University. I had a chance to go up there and give a presentation, and I was so excited because I thought I was going to get to meet him, and then he left and went somewhere else. But in his research, I don't remember the year he felt like, maybe 2030, 2040, he said the theoretical yield was to be like 1,311 bushels. So I thought that'd make a great pioneer hive number, 1311. What kind of letters would be behind it, QXRZ, something or another. But his whole concept was there were other things that were going to start influencing how we could be more efficient capturing sunlight. And we talked about narrow road or just a little before we got up here, but I don't think we're there. We're clearly over 500, we're clearly over 600. I truly believe we're somewhere around that 800 or 900 bushel yield once you open the bag. All it's going to do, as soon as you open it, there's a minus button hidden. I just want to slow that curve down. Now, the next question in reference to, in the last 5 years, some of the things that we have done, we transitioned into being more efficient with their nutrients and fertility. We're strip tilling, and then we're adding other properties in there like the humic acids, and then we're feeding the biology. We've focused a lot more on that. I've not been a guy here until recently where I've been introducing a lot of new stuff, but our efficiency on the fertility has increased greatly. Strip tilling, starter on both sides, wide dropping. How many here run wide drops? Anybody here run easy drops? You guys that are running wide drops, y'all need to look at easy drops. That is so much simpler. It doesn't look like you let a bunch of hogs out in your field when you back up. because it can do some damage. The key is placement. That's the key. And some of the changes that we've had, there's a lot more, Rob, but there are some of the key ones right now that I could name off.
And just a thought, we have other seed companies represented in the room besides Pioneer. Just saying.
I get it.
Next question. Next question. Yeah, go.
Question for David. In response to Dr. Below's 7 points, and knowing you're on some amazing soils where you are, all soils aren't created equal. If we go to the number 7 point, and he called it 10 bushel, if you're in the lower end of the quality on soils, how much wider is the range in terms of the benefit the biologicals can have compared to on ground like you're at?
Okay, now, when y'all, everybody, I've had, not everybody, but folks say, hey, if you could farm anywhere in the world, where would you want to farm? Well, I want to farm in Virginia. If I had an ideal location, and if I had a way to manage the weather better, I would like to be in an area where we had good heat and we had cold nighttime temperatures. So somewhere at higher elevation, Texas or somewhere, the Panhandle, Texas or Colorado, if I had plenty of water, where we had heat, cool down. We farm fine sandy loam soils. So CECs go from 1.6, my best soil is 6.7 CEC. Not what y'all are probably usual and customary. The difference is I can screw my dirt up and I can fix it really fast. When you get into the higher CEC soils, it takes longer. It's taken y'all centuries or decades and generations to lower your fertility, and now it's going to take you longer to build it because you haven't been adding micronutrients, you've been taking them away. And now in reference to the biologicals, on that number where they talk 10 bushels, whether or not you're introducing new biologicals or you're feeding more of what you have, I think there could be more emphasis on that. And then understanding how, I like where Connor talked about being efficient and how you can influence those portions. When you can get that to start early and then maintain that system throughout the whole season, you're going to see a better plant health. And most times when we start introducing some of these biologicals or feeding them, we see different root developments, plant height is different, bigger stalk diameter. So the plant itself is responding. And there's, whether it's a synergistic effect, the plant's happy and the biology's happy.
Great comment.
What else? Next question. Yeah, go right here. Just be loud.
Yeah, Dr. Connor, so to David's point, we were talking about feeding or stimulating the biology that's in the soil, and there's talk around our biology is out of balance. So maybe bacteria levels are too high, fungal levels are really low. And my question is to you, if we're just feeding and stimulating the biology we have, but it's out of balance, are we doing anything well? Or do we need to focus on getting the soils in balance properly? And if so, how do we go about doing that?
Great question. So to repeat that, there's biology in our soils. The question is, we know that the biology is there, but is it out of balance? Too many or little fungal communities or bacterial species? And is there ways to get it back into balance? And that's a great question. And one of the ways I'll kind of go back, when I think about fertilizer, and especially these soils, right, in the Midwest, we know our soils are rich. You get the soil test back, and based on that soil test, there's enough nutrition in there, you shouldn't have to apply anything, right? Yet, we do. You still pay that bill, still apply that fertility, the availability of the fertilizer, and we're pushing for 300 or more bushels. So we also just need to provide a lot of nutrition at a rate that the crop in an unmanaged scenario wouldn't need. Think about biology in the same way. We're now pushing plants to grow at levels they maybe wouldn't have 10, 20 years ago. And then as the biology also kept pace with that. So some things to consider there. When I think about the balance, is it adding some microbials to tip the balance in one favor or the other? It is a season-long play. And so there's no real easy answer to that. But it's a balance, I think, too, as well as understanding what you do have.
And there's some work we've done on that long-term site. Sometimes the biology you have is the biology you have, and it's hard to change that without many years of management. But once you know that, you can then target where you're at. So balance is key, and then it comes back to the other question. It's going to be a different balance for every farm, right? So every soil type, crop rotation might need a different balance. So to quick summarize, I guess, as I ramble on, it's important to know what you have, what you're working with, and then understand where you can maybe improve the balance with some additives, things like that. But trying to change that overnight, it's not going to happen. It's also going to be a multi-year approach, whether it's different tillage practices, additives, things like that.
So Connor, if it's, you tell us to know what we have, and we as a grower, we pull soil samples, and I've transitioned from, one soil sample per field, then we ran Veris, and now we're creating zones, which is a glorified soil survey, and then we got into grids, because we noticed we were struggling with some pH problems, and then we went to 1 acre grids. So we transitioned to be more specific. We pull that sample, we send it off, we get an analysis. Do you feel is there a good way in which we could find out what their biology is? Because I hear these folks say, hey, send it here and send it there, and I don't have any confidence in them right now.
Yep. So another great follow-up question. How do you measure, or when should you measure? What scale? Another challenge to this whole thing is the community you have at planting is a different community that you have at tassel, is a different community that comes up at harvest too. It's the dynamic system. That community is changing as the crop changes. So when you measure, right, you get different response as well. And it's, did my management change it, or was it time of year? Other things, did it rain yesterday before I sampled or not, might change things from that regard. So what we tend to think and look at is the function of the soil. So a lot of times the microbes that are there, but it's the function. And I was talking to somebody the other day that brought up a really good point. As those microbes change and adjust, if function is reduced at one point, somebody's got to pick that up. And then how do you look at function, right? You can get into all the soil health indicators and the enzyme assays and that route. But a lot of that comes down to nutrient cycling. So nutrient availability is indirectly a look at how the microbes are functioning. pH, things like that. Soil structure, that's big for the no-till with the fungal communities, things like that. So yes, I am not yet sold that you should grid acre sample for community analysis yet, because there's just a lot yet to be learned on that regard. But just observing, watching, looking at your soil test nutrient levels, that also is an indication of how the microbes are cycling things as well.
Let me chime on this too, because we're talking about two things here. We're trying to make sure the plant has enough nutrition, and it gets its nutrition from soil and fertilizer. And this part about the soil test and the CEC and the soil health, this is all the soil release. That's what we're measuring. That's what we're measuring the soil test for. But we also have the fertilizer use. And I'm going to tell you the reason that we fertilize is because the soil does not release the nutrients fast enough at the time of peak demand. So I'm going to tell you a 230 bushel corn crop between V8 and R1, that's 21-day period, 7 pounds of N per day every day. 7 pounds. Now you think the soil can supply 7 pounds? No way. I mean, maybe 2 or 3. You gotta fertilize that. And as the yield goes up, so does the peak uptake demand go up.
So you're telling me to have 300 bushel corn requires less nitrogen than 600 bushel corn?
More nitrogen. Yes, it does. I do. Shocking. Yeah. As you increase the yield, you have to increase the peak uptake from fertilizer. Soil's going to be the same.
Next question.
Come on, y'all.
That was one question I had on 600 bushel corn.
Here comes a mic right behind you.
On 600 bushel corn, what was the nitrogen application and how did you get it out?
Okay, the fertility, I thought you were going to say how fast could you run the combine? Y'all know how many times I hear that. Like, man, what's it like picking that kind of corn? Oh, yeah. Well, combine can only handle so many bushels per hour, so or per minute, or however you want to gauge it, so you just got to slow down. That's all it is. But the fertility side, we're in some cover crops. They're not as big as a program for us. We're in the seed business. So cover crops can become weeds where we're growing cereals for seed. So unless it's a farm where it's just corn and soy, we'll do cover crops there. On our other farms, we do have small grains. So we have stuff growing all the time. For the most part, the time in which there's nothing growing is during planting and harvesting. Now, fertility-wise, we're putting nitrogen in the strip. I do not broadcast any fertilizer, any nitrogen on our crop. The only time we would consider broadcasting any nitrogen is when we're doing the foliar applications. We don't put any mass pounds of nitrogen broadcast. So we're putting it in a strip, and that's not really focused on nitrogen. It's only like if we're adding MAP to it or a DAP, and then with the sulfur. So if we're using ammonium sulfate in that strip. We don't think about putting urea out because I'm focusing on in-season management there. And so acres get treated that way. Then every acre on our farm has the planter go across it when you're planting corn, right? So we're portioning fertilizer there. We have starter either on one side or both sides of the road, and we're putting roughly 65 to 70 pounds of nitrogen down with their starter. 3 inches to one side, and we try to go, 4 inches deep. Try to be below that seed if possible. Nothing to infer from a nitrogen standpoint. Then we start side dressing or wide dropping. Mr. Belay showed where roots are growing. I feel they capture some of that synergy. They get in the middle part of the row and capture, but they're, maybe 4 or 6 inches below the surface. Don't have roots up on top. So we start wide dropping, and then we wide drop. And we used to fertigate, but now we have become more efficient with their wide drop because we're using easy drop, so I'm not worried about crop damage. So we're just making multiple applications of nitrogen through the season. I don't want to fertilize for those high yields up front, because what happens if we have a weather event and we lost yield potential, or we have a storm, or we have a lot of cloudy days. So then their yield level has been dropped, so we respond based on the growing season, and we identify or know when we can influence yield, so we make sure we're in front of that by a couple of weeks. So that's how we manage it, and I've dropped the fertigating portion out. So it's in some in the strip, a big slug in the starter, and then we run the wheels off a John Deere sprayer.
Next question. Well, while you're thinking about it, Connor, I got one for you. What's the craziest thing you've ever seen Fred do? Ooh.
Better think about that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
A lot of things to pick from. Is that what it's saying?
All I know is I got a good answer. I got 3 years till I'm 69, and I can't wait because obviously you can say whatever the hell you want when you get to be 69. That's pretty good. Yeah, so I can't wait. Yeah, go right here.
Yeah, I guess this is my question for any of you guys on the panel. Thinking farm management and ROI, where's that tipping point? I love it, 616 bushel, but what does farm practice look like there as opposed to 275? And where are you making money?
Well, I'm going to start off with that, and I'll let them go. Either you as a grower or your customers as growers, he talked about the weather being number one, and then it goes to fertility. The one thing that holds most growers back for whatever yield they're coveting or to influence ROI is when the planter leaves the field, they're not paying attention to those details as well as they should. I get it. Y'all are planting corn. You don't want to put fertilizer out because it slows you up. You got to cover acres, and you're planting when as soon as the ground's fit. You got to be patient enough and diligent enough to make sure when you plant that seed, all those seeds come up uniformly. If they don't come up uniformly, that crop's not growing in harmony. That minus button's been hit. So if you're going to do any of these applications that that y'all are talking about with the boron, the moly, and other nutrition, isn't it better to feed 100% of that crop that's up uniformly? Because if only 70% of it's up uniformly, then now you're not capturing full benefit of that input you put out there. And that's the foundation. If it doesn't come up uniform, that's just production corn. Y'all know how to grow production corn. You know how to, if you've been growing 250 bushel corn, you know how to do that. If you want to go to the next step up, it's not the hybrid, it's not the population. Fix the planter first. Then when that crop emerges, now you can take it to the next step. That's where I would start.
Fred, how about
Yeah,
you?
I would also say, I mean, Mr. Hill is absolutely correct. No plant left behind. I mean, those are wasted, right? So I can't stress the proper planting. I know Dr. Sible can comment on that on our planter. Oh boy. But here's the other thing that I see. I mean, not only does the planter make a big difference, and not only does the temperature make a big difference, but if you have that place fertilizer at planting, whether that's in furrow on both sides, it will come up more even. So would you agree that better place fertilizer at planting helps improve the uniformity of emergence as much as getting the planter right?
Well, now we're going to get into this arena. You talked about 10-30-40 in the seed trench. That if the seed integrity is good, if you got a high pericard damage, now you've hurt yourself because now you position that fertilizer, but unless you know that seed is safe to where it's not going to absorb that salt and reduce it, then you're going to have seeds behind. Now, I don't know that I would say that the fertility is going to help it emerge more uniformly. I think weather and growing conditions gets it up. Once it's up and starting to grow, then I agree wholeheartedly with you.
So I agree temperature and moisture first, but there's a reason they call it pop-up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll just build on that. They're talking about the start. Remember, growing a crop, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's a season-long game. It goes back to, those 7 wonders and management factors, they all interact, and I'll use a quote that Dr. Hula said, it's not what you do that hurts you, it's what you don't do that really hurts you. And so, if you're managing the crop, you get off to a good start. I like to think about it like a 3-mile race. You sprint the first mile, got everything right at planting, the fertility up front and all that, but then you skip the water tables at miles 2 and 3, you run out of gas at the end, and you crash and burn, and everyone else that paced themselves and stopped those water, pass you up at the finish line. And so what we kind of see is if you're managing the crop, you put all that effort in at the front, don't give up on the back end either. Because if you give up, now your ROI goes down on everything you did up front because you didn't give it the chance to fully realize on the other end. So it's also just a reminder that crop management is a season-long game. And I think 2022 for us was a great example. Kernel weights came through the roof, right? And the yield estimates were coming out in July, and we're all going, oh no, it's not going to be great here. And then boom, for Illinois, it was a state record yield. Kernel weight back end, second half of the season. So for management and ROI, from beginning to end, not just what you do at the front.
Yeah, I'm going to say, it's August right now. Our only hope is kernel weight. Let's hope for cool nighttime temperatures. I mean, nighttime temperature is a killer. Every night it's over 73 at night. That's the voice will go by every night. Last year we got lucky. We had those last 2 weeks of August got cool. Crop stayed screaming green. Let's hope that occurs again.
So you're telling me those 2 days, mornings I woke up and it was 80 and 81 degrees?
You lost 2 bushels. Yeah.
2 bushels.
Yeah, at least.
All right, so now I won't.
Can't do that. What can I say? It's temperature. I think it has something to do with climate change.
Hey, Melanie, go.
David, at Meristem, we're talking about biology is fertility. And you're hearing the biological world ramp up. My classic everyday under influence biologicals. I want you asking brands that how many times are you applying or utilizing a biological or an enzyme throughout your system?
Okay. Until the last 3-4 years, I would say 0. Other than like with ends up zinc and fur, where they're using their light base or whatever. Here recently, we started out with some excavator, and now I drank the Kool-Aid, y'all. 75% of my corn's got hopper throttle. Or we were seeing we did some trials earlier, and then part of the total acre group, the data, they're doing trials, and, when you see stuff work, sometimes you're foolish not to experiment with it on your own. So they're the two big areas in which we focused on that. I am more engaged in trying to stimulate what we have, and I agree with Connor in that things change throughout the growing season. When we get into stresses, we try to feed them, whether it's with sugars, acids, or zinc. I'm just a huge proponent of starting to add these products. I haven't been as big on adding biologicals later in the season. I can learn. Old dogs can learn new tricks.
Hey, I just want to say, there's a lot of salesmen in this room, so y'all stay away from Greenwood Farms. That is my customer. I just want to establish that.
Just want to make that clear. Just want to make that clear. Nice.
We're good, right?
Yeah, we're good. Well done. You might want to actually drive him home. I'm just saying. Okay. All right, Melody, go.
So I want to toss that over to the other two now. So David's really talking about 2, potentially 3 applications of biological/enzymes. Where do you see the biological/enzyme space? Is this the total system, the same as, we think of fertility as dry fertility and then micronutrients through foliars, and so is it a continued system where we're going to do different things throughout the entire season, or are we going to stay kind of in the wheelhouse that we're working on now with the stover management techniques?
Here's one of the advantages of the biological category. We put it at number 7, right, and gave it a 10 bushel value. I mean, that value is a range, and sometimes the range is pretty big, including in poor environments, but the value is positive. I give it a 10 bushel range. But use of biologicals, there's a lot of versatility in their use. That is the only category that you might be able to make multiple applications of and get more than 1 10 bushel increase in yield. So seed treatment, I'll take 10. Maybe I can come back, with a foliar later and take another 10, or some version of 10. So there's a lot of flexibility in the biological category. And the other advantage is, a lot of times, those are free rides of application that you're not paying for. So I think we're only tapping it's the tip of the iceberg. We haven't figured out what the right mixtures are, but I think we're going to have multiple biological cocktails and applications that are, going to keep giving us incremental increases in yield.
Yeah, and what I would say too, and there's a lot of marketing and such on the ability of these products to replace fertility maybe and things like that. One of the things we continually see is when you're doing everything right, and when you think about those 7 wonders, biologicals at the bottom because they interact with everything above them. So it's also ensuring you start with good management. I mean, if your fertility program is off, you don't have the right hybrid or row spacing densities, the biological is not going to help you because you already have something bigger impacting the system. So that's the first place to start, is make sure you got the bases there, good sound agronomy behind it. Now you're saying, what else can I do? That's where I would position the biologicals. It's the next step. It's not necessarily a replacement. We're really excited on the phosphorus side. There's so much phosphorus in our soils, right? And in the entire organic matter soils, about half the phosphorus in the soil is the organic form. You talk about the enzymes and these bacillus that can release phosphorus from that organic pool, which is a good start, but we don't want to mine our soils at the same time either, right? Especially if we're going to continue to increase yields. What we see is you put it with fertilizer, and it keeps the fertilizer available in the first place. One of the challenges with phosphorus is after you apply it, it's not that it's not there, it's that it's tied to the soil. Something else has just tied it away from the plant. Well, if you can prevent it from getting tied to the soil in the first place, it's still there for your plant. So it's understanding that relationship too, and I'm not as much behind the replacing fertility as it's going to make your fertility program better. Now you're going to get 3, 4, 5 more bushels out of the same amount of fertilizer you've always been using. So that's kind of a big thing too, is just don't forget the basics. They're not going to replace good management, it's the next step.
So we're convinced that fertility limits a lot of situations because we rely on an antiquated soil test. If we rely on that completely, we often fall behind. So we agree with you, biology is fertility. But we don't necessarily see biology allowing us to replace the fertility, but rather improve the efficiency of its uptake. I mean, if you get 20% of the phosphorus you apply on the crop in the first year in the crop, that's enormous. But a biological can make that 30 or 40, and that's huge.
Yeah, great comment.
Kid, and to tie on to what she had asked, several months ago, Corteva bought a quote biological company, Stoller. You look at their literature, it's all PGRs and fertility. So when we're talking, and I should have asked this earlier, we're here on a biologicals platform. If that is considered biological, the PGRs, then Melanie, I cut you short. We're adding PGRs throughout the season. But here I'm thinking biology is the protozoa, the fungi, that. So if they're both in the same arena, if we're putting that is part of biological, we do way more than just those couple, 3 times. Yeah.
Oh, I'll follow up on that quick. I had a great discussion last night getting the whole policy side. And first thing policy needs to do is define, right, what is biological or biostimulant and things like that. We generally group PGRs, beneficial microbes, and biostimulants as the biological category. That being said, I would argue that PGRs are an independent thing, especially for those of you familiar with the regulatory side. They're very different. It's these beneficial microbes, biostimulants. The way I oversimplify it's the living, the dead. So that's another thing as you get into this market space. Is the product alive when it comes to the farm? Well, now you got to keep it alive, right? It's just like having kids or pets. You take a lot of responsibility to keep them fed and sheltered, right? Same thing with biological. If it's living, comes to the farm. You got to keep it alive. If that's not in your wheelhouse, then we look at things like the dead, the enzymes or the amino acids, things like that. That can sit on the shelf, and if you forget about it, it'll be okay for a couple days. So
to tie on with that question she had asked earlier, last year I said I had, to get a different result, we got to change something, right? You got to do something different. Well, I'm like, all right, we want to see what we can do. So I talked to my crop duster. How many of y'all deal with crop dusters? And they're low rates. Let's get things done in a hurry. And I found out what my crop duster likes to drink. I know where his wife likes to go out and eat. So coupon, give him some liquor. Just don't let him drink before he flies. And I said, I want your first load every morning for 2 weeks. I got his first load every morning for 13 days. There was one day he was stuck in North Carolina, couldn't leave because of a fog. And we were putting these biologicals really low rates. You can overdo it.
Well, you're an abnormality, you get it.
So, I'm not 69, so I'm not going to say that. So we just prematurely shut the crop down. Now, you can do different things, and solar's got stuff that you want to spray at a particular time. If you spray too early, it's going to shut her down. So now we've changed some things. We're flying, he's been flying twice a week for me. One day he's doing some low rates, and then the next time we're hitting it with micronutrients and nutrition. Just playing. The only way you're going to learn is to try something different. And I hope that's, y'all going out to the field. I wish I could do that one day and go see what y'all are looking at. But again, you got to try something different.
I got a question over here. So, this for Hula, last year you showed a lot of pictures of corn putting on multiple ears. That really stuck with me. How do you get that to go? How do you do that?
I wish I had the answer. It seems for us, I can look at my first tissue sample between 375 to 420 GDUs, and based on one particular nutrient, I can tell me if it's something that it's corn I'm going to push.
What nutrient is it?
It's phosphorus.
Okay.
That one nutrient, if the higher I can get that number, the better opportunity we have, or better chance that we're going to have a better crop. Now, a main stem on a plant is only going to produce so many bushels of corn. And, watching Mr. Bilo last year, he talked about how you can influence the crop. that main plant can only do a certain amount. Now, if you can get support from either 2 ears on the plant or a tiller to put on an ear, then now you have the chance to have more yield. When we have that phosphorus level high early, we have the chance to where that crop can put on additional support. The next hardest thing is, can you keep it? I don't have a recipe for that. Mr. Belo said cool nights, that's number one. Sunlight is king when it comes to corn production in that arena. Now, traveling the total acre group, there's a lot of plants have 2 ears and they feel like, hey, we pollinated that second ear. Can we turn that into a yield? No. If they were fertilizing for 275 bushel corn and now all of a sudden they see a second ear and then they want to fertilize it to make that turn into grain, it's too late. That should have happened much earlier. When they were doing their side dress application, they should have been anticipating that second ear, but then you'd be over fertilizing. Who can take that risk? So a second ear, I can't always assure it, and then maintaining it. That is, you better have irrigation, and you're all in the, here we are, oh, we don't need water. This year, water could have paid for y'all, do you not think so? And then sunlight, low temperatures.
Question over here. Be loud.
I'm good at being loud.
Here comes the mic. You're going to be even louder.
All right, my question is really anybody, maybe targeted Connor. Do you believe from a bulk commodity fertilizer standpoint that the source material has an impact on the biology in the soil?
Good question. I do to a certain extent. I think more when you compare source to source, maybe not, which mine certain map DAP came from, but there is some differences there on the pHs of the granules, what else has been added, things like that. I do think it's a micro influence, so wherever the acidity of the granule is where the biggest influence is. There's a lot of soil out there, and so on a bulk field scale, if I'm wrong, I wouldn't expect that to have a large effect, and depending on your soil type as well, right? Some soils can buffer that a little better than others and things like that.
Fred, did you have a thought on that?
No, you covered that pretty well.
Okay, very good.
I don't know the answer.
Did you have an additional question?
Yeah, so that's maybe geared towards phosphorus, but maybe my question should be specific to potash.
Yeah, my question would tag along. You clearly showed how many pounds of potash it takes.
Yes, and it has to come in vegetatively too. A lot of potassium deficiency when it's dry early.
Yep. So for a guy that's pushing his crop and he's putting a lot of potassium chloride out there, is that good or bad to the biology?
Bad.
And now, if we are reducing that population, which I'm assuming that's what you're saying is bad, I don't say we kill it. How can we stimulate it and refresh it?
The biology?
Yeah. If I'm putting out, and for example, in my strip till, we're gonna have 300 pounds of 0060. And then if I need more potash, because we're in a small grain rotation, I'm gonna broadcast additional potash out there because I know corn loves potash.
Yep.
In my mind, it'll use more than it actually needs.
It'll actually consume it. So I want it to come out of the residue. Dr. Sible showed you how much potassium is in residue. And when you have a cation come out of residue, it has a greater value than it does as fertilizer. Because when it releases it, for some reason it's not fixed in the clay minerals, it releases it with biological activity. So if I get potassium out of residue, it's 2 or 3 times its value as a fertilizer.
Okay. All right, but for my rotation.
And safe.
Okay. For my rotation, we're corn, small grain, double crop beans. So I like to put my potassium out in front of that whole rotation because I know corn's going to
take it up and store it in the residue.
And then when the soybeans leave, there goes my potash. So when I go back in front of corn again, now I'm having to load that system because I've removed a lot of that potash in my soybean grain. So again, I put 600-700 pounds of potash out, 0062 or 060. That's not coming out of the stock because I'm not corn behind corn like y'all are. Clearly it's a salt, it's not good. How can I regenerate? Is it using like hopper throttle, enzymes?
Absolutely, that's true.
I hear you.
I was gonna say decalb seed, but.
It's a great question, and one of the challenges, I'm a big Jurassic Park fan, and I love the quote, life finds a way. And when we're talking about soil biology, it is so dynamic, and every system's going to change. So, and this might be, any good agronomist answer, it depends. And every system and such, so there's that regard. There are things that we're starting to look at, like adding some sugars or humics. Does that bring the microbes back up? Hard to measure directly in things, but one thing too is look at the crop. I always say, happy crop typically means happy microbes, because it's a relationship there. And that crop is stressed. You think it's thinking about feeding in the root zone very much, and the neighbors living down the roots. Now it's focused on itself first, but good things to be thinking about. And I wish there was a really direct answer on knowing the exact impact that rate of source can have.
So we think, because we have a student working on this, we've been adding carbon to the soil as humics or biochar as an artificial CEC to help make the potassium more available. And it's been fairly effective.
Yeah, it's working, and we're really excited about that as an opportunity there, yeah. So the other, keep the fertilizer available, but not maybe rightly in the microbes.
So if we could start from ground zero, let's say your grower decided, hey, I want to start and build whatever I could possibly introduce. Go out and put Telon, a soil fumigate, smoke it all. Now, I know growers that do that, particularly down where they're peanuts and that area. They'll Telon, kill the nematodes, and the biology comes right back. Mm-hmm. Could we not prime it? Could we not kill it and then introduce what we really want? And then things are going to go back to nature eventually.
Yep. From that regard, I mean, there's always a balance, right? So in those systems, they have to do it because the pathogens and things like that, I mean, it's a balance of getting yield versus protecting. In my general opinion, the more biology we have in soils, we're going to be better off in the end. But the other thing to remember is not all microbes are created equal. Some bounce back real fast, and some bounce back real slow. But just because they bounce back slow doesn't mean they're important either. So, fine line there from that regard. But I'm going to lean towards having biology is probably better than trying to start and clean and build, because it's that dynamic system and how fast, goes back to the balance question. If we can put the perfect balance, the problem is they don't grow at the same rates. And so
it won't stay down as long.
Yeah, I get it. Next question.
Question for David. When you're putting your large amounts of potash that you're referencing, are you putting any of it in the fall to get the flush from the chloride?
Okay, the question is, when we're doing the potash, are we doing it in the fall? We strip till in the spring because they're sandy soils. If I put any of that fertility out in the fall, it's going to flush out. And then we also broadcast our potash in the springtime. And spring for us is February. So our potash slugs are going out there. We're going to start planting first part of April, and we'll plant beans in March. And that'll give it time, because it's a salt, it's a rock, we got to get it to dissolve. I don't always know when it's going to rain. And we know it takes us X amount of moisture to get it down in the soil. One thing that we do that we hadn't talked about is I'm going to put humic acid with that potash, trying to buffer that salting index. So we take humic acid to our co-op, our nutrient, they blend it and change the color of the fertility. If y'all use humic acid, you got Soil Warriors or Strip. When I think of Strip Till, I think of Soil Warriors, so I branded myself very well there. Clean your system out, because humic acid, it'll eat stainless steel too. Very good. There's a question right here.
Question, if you look at the biology, microbiologist work like Dr. White and what he's saying the root develops early as a plant. He doesn't like soluble phosphorus and nitrogen close to that. It's like with biology and strip till, where does that balance come in? Having the nutrients close, but not hinder the biology development.
Whoever's going to answer it, repeat the question first.
I got a thought, but I want to hear their thoughts before I.
Just repeat the question. So the question was, the too close of available nutrition, proximity to the root zone maybe have negative impacts on that microbiome relationship. And then how does strip till come into that, or tillage banning in general? The first thing I think of it, and we just got our own little, what we call plot warriors, or soil warriors, we'll be able to look at some of this now moving forward. Really excited about that. Placement, so you think it's going on in the planter, pretty close to the seed. Strip till depends on, running shanks, coulters, things like that. But you are going a little deeper, and so that initial root development maybe doesn't intercept that fertility until it grows down to where that fertilizer is placed. So there's that, you're putting it away, but you're putting higher amounts with the strip till than you would relative to on the planter. So that's the biggest difference between the two. I don't have a direct answer on how that may influence things like that Dr. White's looking at.
I think it's a misconception that fertilizer harms the soil health or the soil biology. That's not what we see. When we fertilize the soil, we actually see better soil activity. Microbes need fertilizer too. Now, there's no doubt too much. Remember the Goldilocks rule? I mean, too much is a bad thing. But microbes, well, we do not see detriments to soil biology from the proper amount of fertilizer. It's the other way around.
And if it is there, it's immediate concentration. There's a lot of soil medium there. And so eventually those that are outside that buffer zone, they'll make up for it and come back and rebound.
Can I ask a question to you guys about you're talking about like feeding the biology and that's there and adding to. I've noticed there's some of these microalgae and some other products other than the humics and the sugars that's for feeding and recharging. Are you looking at any of those products? This is kind of a product development question. The humic market is pretty localized, and we're having guys just buy the dry and blend it up themselves. Big believers, but is there any new technology you're seeing in the feeding that's already there that looks interesting to you?
Yeah, so just maybe we should have started with this a little bit, biological, right? It came back to the how do you define it and things like that. They're not all equal, and I love that they pulled the right quote in for that video that I did, right? You're asking the wrong question about biological. Why do you want a biological? And that comes back to the different types and categories. So we kind of talk about living versus dead. That's pretty obvious and things like that. But I think you're getting to that dead category, right? So marine extracts.
No, I'm not. That's not the question. It's in living soil biology that's currently in all of our soils.
Yes.
Are you looking at it, are there technologies or products that help grow what's already there better than others?
Yep, so getting there.
Is there a food that these bacilluses like and these fungi, the different tribes will eat better? I mean, if everything's there that we already need, it seems like there's a market opportunity to figure out how to feed the ones we want better and grow the healthier kids and whip the fast horse and let the other ones kind of fall behind.
Yep, no, exactly. So that's where we get into those categories, right? So these alginate blends, they got a bunch of goodies in there, right? So there's hormones in there, there's some sugars in there, amino acids, there's enzymes in there, right? That's like a whole cocktail of all these metabolites that just give them to the microbes, and they can either directly use the amino acids, they can use the sugar to grow and populate. So in that case, you're kind of taking a shotgun approach, right? Give it all at once, and maybe that works, maybe that doesn't. We're really interested in just pure sugar. We're having some good success there. And even though, not all sugars are created equal either, we're finding that different sugars we're doing some co-inoculation, put the sugar with the inoculum, but we've also done sugar alone, seeing some positive influences there. Now, I can't attribute that direct to, feeding the microbes in soil, but something's going on. I don't have you need the blend that has everything or just the sugar. We don't know that yet, but there's promise, and we're seeing interesting results. Inferro sugars, the inferro humic acids, and then we've done some with the alginates that kind of have everything. The sugars have been more consistent, I'll give you that.
So one of the things you started out with was you said it's a race. It's not that sprint that 1 mile and then you got, let's say, a 3 mile race. The sugars, I know what I do when I give my grandson some sugar. It's a sprint, and then there's a crash. Now, we can see that in the biological area. We build them up, and then all of a sudden they're done. So how can we prolong that And that's where sugars work, you know, humic acids aren't feeding it, it's just giving it a workspace to feed it because it's cold. But what zinc, you know, other sources, how can we give it that start and then help it stay alive longer without continuing to do sugars and sugars?
So it's a relay race.
Yeah.
And so when I think about something that goes out with a planter, what's the problem with planting and a seed? You don't actually have a plant for 3 weeks. Probably 4 weeks before you have a plant that's big enough to put root exudates out to tell the microbes, I'm here, right? But if you put something on the planter, it's like tricking the microbes that there's some root exudate or things from the plant there before the plant's doing it. You build the community, and I agree, it's not there forever, sugar goes fast, but it builds it up just enough to convince them, and then the crop is there to start feeding the exudates and keep that relay race going. But if you don't have a healthy crop that is able to do so, then you crash and burn as well. So if you build a community with these in-furrow planters, but then you need to feed the plant so it can feed the microbes at the same time. So that's where fertility and placement and management all come into play. Because think about it that way as well. Every time you feed your crop, you manage your crop. Indirectly, the crop feeds and manages the microbes in the root zone. So while you cultivate corn and soybean cultivates microbes in the soil. So that was my recommendation is if you're going to go build a community, you better feed and sustain that pipeline.
Can we forecast what the plant's wanting? Because when you talk about the exudates, you know, and I clearly talk when you dig plants and you dig roots and you got that soil stuck around the root, that's just where the exudates come out. And then you get these brace roots that we don't want to see, but they got that exudate coming out of the tip of it and you taste it. And can we use that as an indicator? Are we getting to that point? I know we will be to say, hey, this plant's telling me this is what we want. Is there a way to find out? Because multiple years ago, a decade and a half ago, Pioneer bought a company out in California. They came and scraped the soil off the root hairs to see what was going on, what was happening. And, you know, they gave me this fancy report, and we had to sign something saying if they found something that they turned it into money, they would only give me $0. But is there a way to figure out what it's telling us it wants?
I'm sure there is.
We need another grad student.
Yeah.
So we got a few. We're thinking.
Grad students need funding too. So, but that was well done actually. That was impressive. Yeah. So yes, but if anything, just go back to the basics. Is the crop look happy and healthy?
Yeah.
It's probably happy and healthy below ground. Hey, grad student's favorite task is digging roots, no doubt about that. Especially a hot July day and it's pollinating. But you know that a happy above ground probably means you got good below ground at the same time. And maybe we'll get there where there's a soil test punch in the ground and you can get the answer in 10 minutes, say it's happy or not. But
So Rob, I'm gonna answer your question. We screen a lot of biostimulants. We have a public screening trial that Dr. Sible runs, where we screen biostimulants on corn, on soybean. It's on our website. We screen a lot of stuff. Some of it we have to sign these agreements that we can't talk about as well. So the first thing we try and do is say, what category do we put this biostimulant in? Is it alive? Is it dead? Is it making phosphorus, nitrogen? Is it humic? What is it? We gotta know first. And we got a lot of success with the sugars. Probably the one that worked the best for us. Sugars in furrow is probably our best biostimulant, well, other than exudator. I mean, but sugars in furrow have been fairly consistent for us. Very much so. They're cheap. We think, you know, I got up this morning after last night. I got that coffee maker going right away. You know, I think it's a wake-up shock for the microbes. The sugar is a wake-up shock for the microbes. And you know, I mean, as Dr. Sible said, we want the microbes to think that corn seed is already germinated, because when the corn seed germinates, guess what it does? It leaks a lot of sugars that the microbes grow on. And so we want you know, when the corn plant germinates, the microbes are all ready to go. It's soft and trigger start.
You have a question right here?
What kind of sugar and what rate per acre?
What kind of sugar, what rate per
So we are using, we've used different sugars. you know, we're right in the backyard of ADM, right? So ADM's our backyard. Apparently they got a lot of sugar, a lot of high fructose corn syrup. And apparently nobody's drinking enough, you know, sugar soda beverages anymore. And there was some beer commercial problem with high fructose corn syrup. And they can't give the stuff away. All right, so what better thing than to take the high fructose corn syrup, which by the way came from corn, and put it back on corn. Talk about turning the tide, turning the tables. I'm going to ask Dr. Sible a question because he invented this. Dr. Sible, what is it called when we feed corn syrup to corn?
That management practice we call cornballism. Rob, that one is trademarked as well. But what we like about corn syrup, it's simple. In the second half of the question, right, we're running 4 to 5 pounds per acre of sugar, right? So corn syrup is a ratio of glucose and fructose. When you come from down to it. And when you look at root exudates of the young plant, just so happens that the fructose-glucose ratio in root exudates is pretty close to the ratio in corn syrup. So we think it's like a root exudate mimic approach. That's where we've had our most consistent success, but we have tried some with these molasses sugars, things that are a little more complicated.
So when you say pounds, how are you introducing that
in furrow?
So dump in a dry.
It's a liquid.
It is a liquid.
So corn syrup would be liquid, so then we blend that with water for an in-furrow application. Anyone that's done food grade dextrose, that's your dry, that you just mix in water, get the slurry, and then put it that way. That one's been less consistent for us, but we've seen positive results. So
we're hopeful that this ether, and maybe Corrigan's in here still, that these lipase manganese can give us a similar shot. That's what
it's all what you're after, right?
We're trying to get a shot before that we can colonize. That's kind of what we're trying to. We've also seen it takes a little bit to get going, so that's very interesting. We probably have to hit the wrap up pretty quick.
Questions? Other questions? Right here?
Yeah.
Go. Be loud.
Yes.
Actually, Rob's got a mic. Hand you the mic.
So in the fall, you know, we talked about, you know, still having that sap in that corn to get it to break down. Is sugar an option if we want to go in there and spray excavator? And, you know, the fodder's already dried out, but we want to get it out there to try to get started on it. Is sugar something we should be looking at to put in the mix?
I can tell you what we started out doing before excavator. Any corn harvested before September 15th, residue's gone. Any corn harvested after September 15th, we were doing sugar, nitrogen, and sulfur. Spraying that on. Now with the advent of excavator, we're still adding the sugar to it later on. Still before, you know, it's whether or not I want to make that application with that sprayer. So we're adding the sugars to it. The key is, if your corn is brown and down, you need to size it. It needs to be touching dirt. And then you need, I can help pray for warm weather, and you need moisture. And Connor said, y'all, you know, there's 2 wet periods, planting and harvesting.
Yep. We did some humic acid with some similar success in the fall, and we'll let you know about the sugars because we did that this year. Crops currently going.
Great. How's it look so far?
Looks great. I planted it. Of course it looks
Well, of course it looks good. All right. Melanie, go.
So we're all here to sell product, and farmers, including the farmers in the room, look at prices and say, God damn, you want me to pay how much?
It's pretty much exactly how they say it, too. Yeah.
So David, I want you, just for the group's sake that didn't hear it last year, for you to talk about how much financial investment you put into your 600 some bushel corn so that they can see investment versus return.
How much do y'all think it costs to raise 600 bushel corn?
Throw some numbers out there.
Just total dollars per acre.
Total dollars per acre. 1,200, 1,400. How much? 1,600. 2,000.
$1,711. Now, that wasn't last year when potash was high, obviously. So, can you make money at that? Sure you can. But the thing is, we only intensively manage a little bit of our farms. I mean, we got pivots, they still to be irrigated. And then also we take, a big 160 acre pivot, and we manage a quarter of it intensively. We take a 80 acre pivot, we might manage half of it. We take a 60 acre pivot, we might manage half or a fair amount, because I can't allow all of it to fall down. Plant this 48,000 plant population, what do you think I'm subject to myself to? Lodging. We get named thunderstorms and come up the East Coast, so we can't afford all that. So we try to learn from those, and then whatever we learn, we implement on production acres. And with fertility management, wide dropping, starter on both sides, seed tests and all those. But $1,711 would it cost us to do that?
Great question, thank you.
I got one last one. The university guys. So, Dr. Bilo, you talk about how soil sampling and the recs and stuff, the information was from back in the 70s, right? So, A, do you trust that still? Secondly, when we talk about crop removal, so specifically, phosphorus or potassium, the removal per bushel, when was that information gathered? And do you feel like it's still accurate today on both of those accords? Because a lot of this stuff has changed since the 70s, and if we're still working on 70s information, maybe we're behind.
Yeah, by the way, the removal per bushel, that's easy. That can be done, that's up to date. I mean, because, and you harvested the bushels right this year, we can analyze those. So those numbers we've looked at hard. There is a little bit, when you look at those coefficients, there's a little range. Those numbers are up to date. I mean, you tell me how many bushels you take off, I can do a pretty good job of telling you what you removed by using average numbers. All right, soil test values, that was done in the 60s and 70s. And think of what the yield levels in the 60s and 70s were. And think of what the densities in the 60s and 70s were. I did not say it wasn't important. The soil test is a pretty good indication of what the soil might supply. I said that the soil's not supplying enough for the yield level. It is not supplying enough to grow 300 bushels, or I don't know, 250, or in most years. So you're fertilizing to meet this period of peak demand. Now there's a lot of interest to re-look at soil test values. There's a colleague of ours that is re-looking at soil test values for phosphorus. He actually has found some of the original farms that they sampled for phosphorus. And the original soil test, he's going back to those farms, and he's trying to let those growers resample. Most of them are worried it's going to change their APH, and they're going to change the rate. They won't let them sample, which is a problem.
Okay. Next question. We got a little bit more time here, and take advantage of these guys. Go right here.
Can you expand on how much
yeah, repeat the question.
The question was the comment on my thoughts on brace roots. If you were to walk into Randy Dowdy's 500 bushel corn area, any of our higher yielding corn, you would not see roots above the ground. But the plant has, if you don't have any compaction and you get that crop off to a good start, right seeding depth, I think that is probably what's holding most growers back, their germination. We planted at the right depth, but where's the germination? I think growers are off target right now. It's too shallow. So there could be some Kentucky windage that might need to happen. You're doing tillage, soil's compressing, your germination depth is too shallow.
Why are they going too shallow? They try to steam? Is that, why are they playing it too shallow?
I think they're doing a good job measuring the depth. I mean, I feel that, what was that rulometer, yeah. Rulometer.
Very pricey.
I feel that they can measure 2 inches, but if they're doing spring tillage, and think about the rain, you're getting compaction on that soil. So it's seeded at 2 inches. All of a sudden we lose a ½ inch of air.
Let me ask you a question that follows up on that. Do you believe you pay for roots with yield? Are roots free, or do you pay for them in yield? What do you think? If you pay for roots in yield, why do you want to see brace roots there? You paid for those in yield. And if there's no need, if you're not bracing the plant up or doing something, it's an indication that you're wasting.
Interesting point. What else? Next one, yeah, right here.
Healthy Plant's a defensive plant. What have you seen relative to biostimulants or fertility relative to horsepower?
Oh boy. So the question said, you know, a healthy plant is good at defense against diseases. So have we seen anything from a biostimulant biological perspective on tar spot specific or disease in general? We're on the yield side, so we don't do much pathology, but obviously when I'm walking plots, if I see the diseases and stuff, I want to take notes. So good news, I haven't seen anything drastic yet on that side. Tar spot for us, where we're at, usually comes in too late when it comes in this year. I don't expect too much of an issue. But healthy plants, good defense. In theory, a healthier plant has better defense, so it might help mitigate some of the disease effects, but I don't have biological biostimulant today that's going to be fungicide yet. So.
Next question. Yeah, go right here.
Can you touch
This
on,
table's come alive all of a sudden. That's awesome.
can everybody up there touch on 300 all the way up to 600 bushel corn? Is it a kernel depth, population, double ears? What is it? Or what's some extremes that you see?
What do they pay you for when you take a load of corn to the granary? Pounds.
So what's the highest you've ever achieved?
As in pounds? Well, you take 600 bushel of corn, multiply it by 56 pounds per bushel, and that's what they paid. But what we're doing, does test weight matter?
Yeah.
Sure it matters. When does it matter? It matters while it's still on the plant. When it's harvested, who cares? Because if I have one ear that weighs, we'll say 0.8 of a pound, and I have another ear that weighs 0.6 of a pound, you know, and once it's harvested, it doesn't matter when we're doing it on yield. So the population, you know, I don't want 14 rows around. We got a lot of 14 rows around corn this year because we were cloudy, smoky early in the season. Now, high yield stuff has come for mostly 16, 18 rows around. What's the highest test weight somebody? I have a personal goal of wanting to see 70-pound corn. We've gotten 65.9 at 15.5 moisture. That's the highest I've recorded. That's 3 bushels. Think about a 56-pound corn and a 65-pound corn. When NCGA, you know, I got pictures of, you know, the new rule is now you have to take a picture of at least 3 foot, you shuck it back and all that. And being part of Total Acre, we talk about uniform emergence, ears going to be on the same node. And then we send that picture off, and I'm getting people saying, hey, Dave, your corn didn't come up uniformly. Because you got these ears on this node, and all of a sudden their ears on another node. I'm like, well, they're the tiller ears, so I don't know what else you want me to do there now. It's not about how many rows around. It's about pounds. And how can we capture the most pounds?
Let me comment on that. So we measure a lot of yield components. And I don't have to tell you, you know, that's called physiology. And you know, yield is number of plants, kernels per plant, weight per kernel. And yield is almost always kernel number. Almost always. And you can derive kernel number from either more plants or more rows, or length around, less tip back, as Mr. Hula points out. So if you get a relationship, I'm going to say 80% of the time, yield is kernel number, 20% of the time is kernel weight. Now there's opportunity in kernel weight, huge opportunity. All right, average. Anybody know what the average seed weight of maize or corn weighs? All right, 260 milligrams. Let's see, milligram, that's metric. All right, that is 86,000 kernels per bushel. So you can increase yield by kernel weight. Now, I want to dispel a myth here. All right. Kernel weight has absolutely nothing to do with test weight. Test weight is a scam of the shipping industry. Yep. All right, high test weight means nothing other than they pack nicely and I don't have to ship a lot of air. So never get the idea that high test weight means high kernel weight. It's completely wrong. I mean, people have that perception. Now, do I want a high test weight? Yes, makes good quality corn, but high test weight means nothing. I mean, we should quit talking about it.
All right, so you're thinking more like 1,000 rand, 1,000 kernel.
Oh yeah,
I agree with you there.
Next question.
So
Yeah, we're getting down to the end. Make sure you ask them. Don't go home wishing, man, I wish I'd asked that. Go, be loud.
So between the three of you, you said, well, David said earlier, it starts with the planter and fixing the planter to get even emergence. What are all three of your favorite planter setups on a row unit and like fertilizer inputs and what's your favorite row unit?
Well, we've only got one planter we're running, but
So you're talking specific equipment. I used to be a precision planting guy. I mean, singulation, spot on, felt very good about it. To get something different, you gotta change. I went with Exactimer. Singulation improved, spacing, but it's not the equipment. I don't care. In their total acre group, I think the second year, the highest yielding grower in corn had an old 7,000 or 7,200 planter. He just knew how to make it work. I don't care what you have. Think what Francis Childs was doing. He didn't have all this technology we have today. So it doesn't matter. You don't have all the bells and whistles. It's just make sure a planter's designed to do one thing. Open up a trench, drop the seed, close the trench. Now let's make sure we space them uniformly. Let's firm it up. Let's get the right depth. And then now you ask fertility. That's another whole arena. The comment question over here was about the fertility and in furrow and the salts and the strip till. I still follow this 2-inch proximity of a kernel of seed, 80-pound salt limit. Do not exceed that. But we put starter on both sides of the row. We put zinc in the trench. I'm not a huge fan, and we didn't cover this. I'm not a big fan of 1030, 40, or any nitrogen or phosphorus in the trench.
Upshift seat.
What?
Ends up
Ends up zinc. I got it. Yeah, I am a zinc guy. I'm in that wagon. The reason being is I feel the plant gets this false sense of security that it has all the nutrition at once, and maybe that release of the exudate changes, and then it's like a start and stop. Then it's like, I don't need this phosphorus because I have it, and then when it truly needs it, it's got to start that cycle all over again. So I'd rather not, I personally don't put those products out in furrow. I want to feed my biology, I want to do whatever it takes to stimulate it. What do you think I'm going to go try this year? We don't have an ADM near us. You think they'd ship me a tanker right now?
Oh, yeah, we have that.
One thing that has made a difference for us, we did go to independent row downforce, and that really improved our row-to-row variability in the small plot, and that's everything. So in that regard, I do like independent row downforce. The more row units you got, that one side of the planter might be doing one thing, another. That has made an improvement in our variability and our data, and then our overall yields keep going up too. So.
Now, corn, I will never plant corn without starter. Never. And I've traveled and I go to shops and see all these fancy planters and they don't have fertilizer on it. And I'm like, aggressive grower, like how come you don't have fertilizer on it? My planter operators don't like it.
Hey, David, you need to specify, when you say starter, you're not talking about in furrow.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm side placement. In furrow, thank you, Patrick. In furrow is in furrow, pop-up. Starter is beside the row and hopefully below the seed. And so I will never plant corn without side placement and below the seed. But this one particular grower, his two planter operators, they didn't want to stop. They didn't want to fill up. I said, you know the value of it? He said, sure. Well, we sometimes have to pick our battles. His plant operator was his dad and uncle. So I get it. But y'all, there is a penalty. You saw the pictures that I think it was Mr. Sible showed of the corn with fertilizer or different fertilizers at plant height, same hybrid. That's real. And that's bushels. I don't know what the difference in bushels were, if there were any, but it is huge for us.
20 amount.
Wow.
Great. Go right here.
What do you think the future is short?
Future of short corn was the question.
Yeah, I'll touch on that one. I didn't get a chance to talk about short corn. Next biggest innovation, and it's going to be the next big thing in hybrid innovation. It's going to change a lot of things. Remember when the rootworm trait, in my world, when that rootworm trait came out, oh boy. I mean, we adopted those immediately because they worked. And the short corn is going to be the next major genetic innovation. There are three major advantages to short corn. There's environmental advantage, wind damage, seen it myself with my eye every time. There's a management advantage. He can be able to get his Hagee over it, no problem at all. You can put that on anytime they want.
I don't run a Hagee. I don't want to see what my boone's going to hit.
All right, well, you can get over it. And there's a very serious physiological advantage of short corn. If I had a short corn plant here, I can show it to you. Mr. Hula and I were talking about this. He says, well, he's got some on his farm. Above the ear, it doesn't look any different. Below the ear, it looks different. Now, what happens is, those internodes, those stalk internodes, right below the ear, are compressed. And so in other words, the energy that that plant would have been taking to grow stalk is now going to the ear and the root. What do you need stalk for? Hold the leaves in the ear. And so this is a chance. Well, what if I gave you an extra paycheck right before Christmas time? So I'm giving you more money at the right time, and I say you distribute it however you want. That's what short corn's built by accident.
Do you think that we're going to see a yield penalty in the first few years because of different type of management?
So it'll probably be they don't have the traits worked out in the hybrids yet. I mean, we're running double pro short corn. They're fantastic.
And from a management, still responsive from what we've seen in our work here. So
I think they're going to have to drive density. I think they have to drive roads, narrow road spacing. You have to do some other stuff to go along with it.
Well, if they start driving density, that's a win for them because we're going to be buying more seed.
Oh, that's their evil plan.
Or road configuration changes.
Yeah, yeah, maybe twins will be better. Or narrower roads. But I'm really excited about it. And we worked on it for a couple of years. You know, I'm a fairly short guy, so I like the idea that you can, you know, I mean, it's not how big it is, it's how you use it. I mean, I have fairly small feet, so.
Wow. Okay. All right. I'll come and visit you in jail. All right, here we go.
I work for that.
Be loud.
I sell seed for that short corn company in Stein, and so it's our 12th year, right, in short corn. And in our silage test, the shorter corn at higher populations has more biomass than that tall stuff that's local.
So we're on the same page, aren't we?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also about interception of sunlight. If we got short corn and we're not capturing all that sunlight, we have to then do some management changes. We're either going to go narrow road, thin row, or something. Any sunlight hitting the ground, that's wasted energy.
Wasted sunlight.
Time for two more, or we'll quit. One right here.
If the stable's come alive.
You're up. You're the last one. Okay, go right here.
In your production corn, not your ideal corn, if you had to pick 2 passes of fungicide, do you put a micro in there, and what growth stages do those be?
Okay, if we're not using Xyway, not in furrow, in the starter, our first pass would be with our herbicide. Because you got to realize we're in humidity, moisture, so we'll go then, and then we like to wait till we first see a brown silt. Because I'm trying to protect as much grain fill as I possibly can. If we have Xyway, we'll go roughly around that B12. Last time my sprayer could go across the field so I can protect that ear leaf. And then we'll go back late with that aerial application somewhere similar times brown sill to protect as long as I can. And then the micros, I will always focus on adding boron and moly when we're making applications. And when we get late, I'm a believer, we've been talking about biology in the soil, but there's also biology on the leaf. And then we like to put some potassium acetate in. So, Smart KB or whatever y'all call it.
How did you do your sideway? Is it?
Sideway, we're in the side placement down deep. The concern, and we saw it early on, the benefits of it, but that germination inhibiting problem. If we're trying to make sure we get uniform emergence, why in the world do we want to make an application that can inhibit that? So keep it out of the end furrow. It's a good product if you deal with disease. Put it in the starter, side placement.
Dr. Connor, one more comment, just in comment, wrap us up. Ooh. So one thing I say, and I'll go back to where we kind of had the panels about biologicals and stuff. We're excited about where those next steps can go. Be willing to try it, but don't forget the check strips. Make sure if you're going to try something new, you really understand it. Don't just sit home, say, hey, there's the next best thing, go to the next pass. You know, make sure there's a reason for why you're going to use a next step input from any product or practice perspective. Really have that reason first, and then you're setting yourself up for a better chance of success. David, one more comment from you.
We're in an exciting arena of agriculture. I know what my granddad was talking about, my dad, and just like I said on the video, but let's be mindful be thankful for the benefits we've had, and that hands of success that I talked about. There's a palm that holds it together. And let's put that together and utilize it and be thankful for what the good Lord's blessed us with.
And Dr. Fred?
Yeah, so you can't prove something doesn't work. So I can't tell you this product doesn't work. You can't prove it. Growers don't want to know what doesn't work. They want to know what's possible, and they make the choice. So, you know, when my colleagues go out and say, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, nobody listens to them, right? You can't prove something doesn't work. But what you need to do is give them the story for why it might work, to let them make the choice. That's what they want. They want options.
Folks, thank the panel. Awesome, guys. Fantastic.